Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of the seminar Improving Skills, Expanding Knowledge, Supporting Tools for the Master Courses on Literature and Film at the University of La Rioja. Today I will be interviewing Don Austin, who is a writer, an artist, a photographer, and our conversation will go under the title of Poetry, Cities and Love in a Hypertext, the journey with Don Austin into his work Net After Snowslides. I'm sure that his participation will be very helpful for the students that have to deal with this work in the course entitled Literaturas en Inglés y Cultura Visual, English Literature and Visual Culture, on the second term of this year. Our schedule is I will give you like a brief introduction to Don Austin, and then we'll have like a relaxed conversation about the things, the insights that he wants to give us about the making and the reading and the viewing of his very interesting, fascinating actually work, Net After Snowslides, that I will be calling from now on Net. So Don Austin, he is a Canadian artist and a visual artist. He is the author of 2 books of short fiction. One is called The Portable City, and the other one is called The Lost Tribe. Both were published by Arsenal Pub Press in Vancouver, British Columbia. His hypertext fiction, called Net After Snowslides, is in the special collection of Memorial University of Newfoundland and is viewable on their websites. It is accessible on the internet worldwide. His latest publication is Notes Toward a Poem About Play, that was done with the local artist Tara Bryan and published by Running the Go Books and Broadsides. He lives in St. John's, Newfoundland, which is closer to Spain than it is Vancouver. So it is hello, Don. It is a great pleasure to have you here, a great honor. Thank you so much. And
thank you for having me. It's a new experience, like writing the hypertext.
Yes, it might be daunting at the very beginning, but we don't have to worry. We are just between friends. So the first question that I'd like to ask you, that is, if you don't have anything other or anything else to say, is how would you define a literary hypertext?
Okay. Well, the computer itself is a hypertext because it has links. So you can click on something and go somewhere else, which you don't have in a print book. In fact, I find when I read print books, often I press on a word thinking that it would give me a definition. And then I realize, oh, it's print. It's not my tablet. So that is the difference between print fiction and literary hypertext. It has those links so that it expands what the text can tell you.
Yeah, I find that a very, very practical and to the point definition that I love, that I like it very much, because, you know, normally when one can go to criticism and theories about this, and they are like much more, much less to the point, I should say. So yes, do you think that literary hypertexts may be confusing to readers? Like they seem to be random structures. You never know where you are. And if they are confusing, they are, I don't know, disorienting. Why do you think that is so?
You know, I think it was, but I think it's becoming more acceptable to people because, I just want to say to begin that this was written 20 years ago. This is the 20th anniversary. So it's nice that you were still interested in it. And, when most of my friends write print books, they write novels, stories, poems, and they didn't seem at all interested in reading something on the internet that was confusing like that, right? But now, 20 years later, we have the tablet. You know, it is hard to read, I think, on a desktop computer. I think it's much easier on a tablet. So anyway, I think now we've become used to that. But the other thing about it is our life is full of interruptions anyway, right? And our life is kind of confusing and circles back on itself. And also all of the modern inventions are about interruption. You know, the telephone, the car, and the TV set. You know, there's always pauses and stops. So I think we're more used to that sort of mindset of being interrupted and of going somewhere else, right?
Yes, that's very true. But still, if technology and digitalization and everything has advanced so much, still students, when they come to a course on literature, they still expect to have a print book with a table of contents and with chapters, and they know where they are, and still they are reluctant somehow to go through the experience of going into a text that they know where they are going to end up in, or with different paths and a kind of different structure. So it's still like very much a very contemporary thing that has to be assimilated by students that I'm sure are very, very familiar with other digital devices.
Yeah, you know, I think you're right, and I find the same thing. What I like about a print book is you know how big it is, whereas a hypertext, you don't really know how big it is, at least the one that I made. Yes. And I find that reassuring, you know, knowing that it's this much, and I have this much to go through. But I think both forms have an advantage and a disadvantage. You know, for example, during the pandemic, I could use the library. I could find books, you know, and read, even though I couldn't go in there, you know, and so I took advantage of that. And I find I'm getting more used to both forms. But you are right; it does take some time. I think maybe the newer generations coming up are used to reading on a screen. You know, they'll be more familiar with it. But I have to say, I haven't read Hypertext since I created that one. For some reason, I don't know.
They're very challenging. I think one of the challenging things in your work is that it is like a mix of narrative and poetry and photographs and images, and so perhaps students, I don't know, they go for one genre and they have these expectations, and when they face something that they cannot understand perhaps from the very beginning, you know, that they might quit, or they might say, well, but what this is, I cannot relate to this in the way I have related with other novels that I've read before.
Yeah, I think you're right again. But you know, I think the hypertext has one foot in visual art and one in you know, written art, right? And sometimes there was a curator at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and he was talking about contemporary art, because a lot of people are put off by contemporary art. They think maybe, you know, their child could do it, or that it's confusing, and they're just not interested. But his advice was just to relax when you come to it and be open, you know. And he also said that it is weird, but that's why we like it, you know.
That's great.
And another thing I just want to say is, when I first wrote the text part, it was very long. It was like 150 pages. And then something happened in my head, and I thought, if I'm going to be weird, I should be brief, at least be brief, right? So I made them really small.
Yes. Which was then the hardest part of writing your net? Was it like summarizing and editing things out?
Yeah.
What was the most enjoyable part of the experience?
Yeah. I think the hardest part was the narrative, because we're so used to having, you know, a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Even though some people have said that a story should have that, but not necessarily in that order. But this is closer to, instead of a story, this is meant to be kind of the experience of walking around a city and meeting people, seeing things, and those things change your thoughts. So your thoughts are constantly being changed and misdirected and redirected, you know, so it has that sort of rhythm to it, rather than reading a story where, you know, in the beginning this happened, etc., right? Like a Charles Dickens novel, for example. Yeah. But I found all of it difficult, everything, you know, every part of it. But it was a challenge, and I was lucky enough to get a grant to do it. You know, someone was paying me to do it. So, but at the end, when I was trying to figure out how to arrange the different pieces, I ended up printing them out and putting them on a wall in my house. I had a room that was empty, and I just filled the wall with it so I could look at them all at once. You know.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about the photographs? Because they were taken, I don't know whether all of them, but most of them were taken at the time when St. John's was snowbound. There was this layer of snow that prevented people from properly walking. So what was your experience when taking those pictures?
I took them over 2 winters, and I took about 2,000 photographs. Digital cameras had just become, you know, cheap enough to buy one, and it was fabulous because you could suddenly take as many photographs as you wanted. Whereas before, you know, I'd have a camera and it was very expensive to print off the pictures, you know, and I couldn't modify them. So, you know, when it came to make this, I had Photoshop. So I took a course in Photoshop, and I could alter them and edit them. But what happened was, as with most things, we've noticed during COVID, for example, that walking or being out is really helpful for our stress. And I just had a relationship that I had great hopes for, and that dissolved, right? So I found walking was really helpful. And I had this new digital camera, and everything looks interesting when you have a camera, I think, you know. So, and I live in a city small enough to walk everywhere pretty much, you know. So that was the experience I could get.
I find that, that's great. Like it's like a flaneur, or perhaps we can talk about this later on, like the experience of walking itself and looking at the surfaces of houses. It connect with your inner thoughts, and then they make you think about things, or they make you remember things that were there and that kind of spring up at that moment. And then walking the street is not just walking the street, it's reading the street, and also making recollections. So it's like 3 things at the same time. It's walking the city and reading the poetry or the lyricism that comes from houses or landscapes. And also that is the same at the same time, as you said before, navigating the internet. It's like this experience in mobility that comes, that is walking and reading and navigating. They all become one single thing in your net.
Yeah, I think so, yes. Yeah. I find when I forget to take my camera, I really wish I had it. I see things that, you know, and often one can't capture them, you know, or remember them, you know, that a photograph does that. That's what I love about a photograph. It's a particular viewpoint at a particular time that will disappear and that you've captured somehow, you know.
It's true, like every time that perhaps you do the same walk, and then you notice different things, and there will be different things anyway.
Oh, no doubt about it. Yeah.
Yes.
There's a poem by William Carlos Williams that is about that. It says, "I never tire of these streets." And it's very mundane things, but and also you can never remember it. Like if I've lived in this house for 30 years and walked up this street. But if I had to give the colors of the houses, I couldn't do it. Maybe I get a couple right, you know, but.
That's very true, because it depends on your mood, I guess, what's on your mind at that moment. And go on, sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just thinking that because your net is about a person whose heart is broken, who's lost his love, and all of a sudden the world becomes empty, and that perhaps is this emptiness that makes him perceive things in a different way, like notice new things that he never noticed before, and then focus more on the surroundings, perhaps, than he did before.
Yeah. Do you mean empty because it's full of snow all of a sudden and people aren't out, or?
As well, but also because when you lose something that gives sense to your life, you're not the same person, and when you yourself, your body is on the street again, perhaps you tend to focus on other things to fill the void that you have inside you. I don't know.
It could be, yeah. I found, you know, that over the years I've kept a journal or a diary, but I mostly keep it when I'm sad or when something like that has happened, where I'm alone or sad. And I think that's where some of the text came from, you know, but this time I made it into a hypertext. So that's another way to relieve stress, is to write, you know.
Yes, it's very therapeutic. Did you intend to be net after snowslides therapeutic for yourself or for other people, for your readers?
Yeah, no, I never thought about it. It's totally unconscious. It was totally unconscious. I've never, to me, that seems like a cold sort of foreign word, you know?
Yes. Yes.
It's like, I think what has ruined exercise is the word exercise.
Yes.
Like, I've tried exercising and I hate it, but every day I walk or ride a bike or, you know, do something, right? But I never think of it as exercise first, you know? So I wouldn't think of it as therapeutic. But I'm not against the word. It's just it might spoil it for some people. Right?
Well, it's probably that I don't have like a huge range of words to use for this, and that's the one that came to mind.
Oh, okay.
But, like, you know, like there is this sadness that permeates the whole narrative from beginning to end, at the same time as there is humor, as we might just mention later on, and at the very end. You, the poet, makes the effort of picking up all those gloves that have been.
I see what you mean.
It seems that there's always this effort to recover what has been lost.
And it's always one glove, right? People lose one glove, one shoe. You know, you wonder what happened.
One shoe. I think that's in accidents.
Right.
It's less frequent, but you're right. Like every time that there is two things, there is a couple, then one mysteriously disappears. Okay, if you like the idea, I'm going to read out an excerpt, a brief excerpt from one of the interviews that you did in the past. That it was called "Working in the Dark."
Oh, okay.
Where you compare the hypertext with the walking with the city, and I think somehow it completes, or it talks back to the things that you were saying before about walking in the city and the kind of creative actions that may provoke in.
Oh, okay.
You said. The first page is like that first street we set foot on in a new city, and we find it starts by accident sometimes, depending on the people we meet, the things that pique our interest, our own energy or fatigue, and so on. And then you say, just as when we walk around a town, we click on certain sites or overhear words which sometimes change our train of thought and linked us to memories or ideas, I thought the piece could imitate this process, so that reading will be closer to our everyday experience than what we often encounter in fiction. I don't know whether you would like to comment on this or share your thoughts about this idea that you mentioned some years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that I first started reading fiction seriously probably when I was in my late teens, which would have been in the 60s. And I started reading the beat writers. I don't know if you are familiar with them, like Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac's On the Road. I've since changed my mind about their literary quality, but at the time, what I really liked about them was they seemed to be more closer to life than the other fiction that I had been reading, you know, the more traditional conservative fiction. So I like that quality, you know, and this is what I found about the hypertext, about doing this. It was sort of closer to, you know, the experience rather than this structure that's a little artificial, maybe, you know, that we've learned to understand. The other thing is that I've always thought that poetry, for example, shouldn't be this elite sort of thing that's very special. That it should be something we read like the morning newspaper. So that this has this, it's a democratic thing or quality about hypertext is anyone can read it anywhere if they have a computer, right? So it's not elitist, and it's very easy to you know, to find. Anyway, that's about it. But that's what I liked about it.
Yes, it's funny that you should say that poetry is like reading the newspaper, because I've always thought that poetry brings us the news, the real news about the world. And this is something that I keep saying to my students. I can't remember whether it's my own thought or if I borrow it from someone else, but it's so very true that you can learn the history and the real life of the people through poetry, whereas people think normally, or readers may think, that is something distant and detached from the things, and that is only the product of a kind of travel soul that is using like a very sophisticated words to give vent to his emotions. But it's actually not that. I think that it has a component, a historical component, a very contemporary a element there that kind of brings you closer to the realities of every country. Actually, go on. No.
When I first started writing, I lived in Toronto, Ontario, the biggest city in Canada, you know, and I really enjoyed it. And I had this job, and I saved some money, and I thought, I was in my early 20s. I thought, I don't really want to do this, you know. So I said, from now on, I will get a part-time job and write. So I moved to Vancouver, and I had a really small apartment, but I would go to the library and write. And on the way home, I stopped at a bookstore, and there was this little tiny literary magazine, and it was called 3 Cents Pulp. It cost 3 pennies. It was a little tiny thing. So I submitted to them, and they printed my work, and then they printed the books. They became the press that printed those books, right? But to me, that was the idea of how it should be accessible to people, you know. But the other thing I want to say about the metaphor of the city is that when we go to a new city, you know, we don't often have a plan of how we're going to study it or absorb it. So the hypertext, I feel, is a little bit like that. Like I don't expect people to read the whole thing. I would like them to go in, read a little bit, and then quit it, you know, because poetry is kind of dense and it's hard to read a lot of it. So just go in, read a little bit, forget about it, come back later, oh, I must, you know, and go somewhere else, right? And you can read it randomly. There are these little links at the bottom, as you know, 2 links. If you click the link on the right, you will go through each one in order, and you will be able to read all 43 pages. If you go to the other one, it'll be random. So depending on your mind, one.
That's very good advice. It's true that poetry is very dense, and then you read a little bit, and then you need time to think about that. You have to pause. Whereas with narrative, it's just that you're eager, you're anxious to know what's going to happen next, and then you're somehow absorbed by the whole thing, like a river. But with poetry, it takes you back to yourself, and you need some time to think about that. Yes.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I find that memorizing poetry really helps, and it gives you something to think about when you're walking. If you don't have your camera or anything else, you know, and you can kind of rehearse it in your head and think about it, you know, and get. There's a great poem by Robert Frost. I don't know if you know him, the American writer that I love. It's called Acquainted with the Night, and it's just about that, walking at night, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But what I like about him is that he doesn't tell you what to think.
Mm-hmm.
People have definite ideas about his poems, and they think that's what he means. But if you actually read them, they're very open.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can have your own opinion about them, right? You can bring yourself to them.
That's a very good reference for our students as well, and for myself.
Yeah, yeah.
Perhaps we can move to the idea of chaos and aimlessness that is related to the things that you said about the kind of novels or narrative that you like when you were a teenager with the Beat generation, like their experiences were put in very chaotic terms as well on the page. And then there's also this component of coincidence and accident, as if sometimes we get to learn things from the insights that accidents give us, like a coincidence, or when things happen in a random manner. Randomly is one word that you often use. Do you agree that like the most profound or deeper insights that we get in life as well come mostly from things that happen by chance that we hadn't planned beforehand?
Yeah, I sometimes think our whole life happens by chance almost, you know, like our parents and our grandparents met by, you know, and sometimes our parents, one of them was in love with someone else, and if it had worked out, what would we be? But yeah, I think you're right. I really believe in chance. The earliest, when I first started being interested in contemporary and modern art, you know, I really liked the surrealists, and they embraced chance. You know, it was a really big part of their the way that they made their art, you know, and wrote. In fact, the automatic writing that I use to begin when I start writing, I just start writing randomly without thinking about it or without judging it. And I'm waiting for something to come up out of my unconscious. And that's an old surrealist technique, you know, that they were around the time that Sigmund Freud was first making those discoveries, you know, about our unconscious selves. Mm-hmm. So, so there is a link there for sure, yeah. Yeah.
That's why perhaps you like André Breton so much, the French artist. Yeah. And also you quoted in your net from Sebald, the W.G. Sebald and John Ashbery. Would you like to say something from those poets, or how they reach you, or why you use them in your net?
Yeah, I think I was just reading them at the time, you know. Since then, I've gone on to other writers that I'm now interested in. So, you know, I think everything is an inspiration somehow. If you are open, I think everything can affect you. You know, everything or anything. You know, that there's no particular way. It's funny. I mentioned Allen Ginsberg earlier. And when I was living in Vancouver, he was in town and he was giving a workshop, a one-day workshop on writing. And I thought, oh, okay, I have to go to that, the master, right? So I went to the workshop, and it began in the morning. We had a morning session and an afternoon session. In the morning session, I thought, well, he will tell us how to write, but he didn't. He taught us how to meditate. So we sat there, right, trying to concentrate. And while I'm concentrating, I'm trying to think, I thought we were coming here to learn how to write. And it was only afterwards I realized, in order to do anything artistic or with writing, you have to be able to concentrate, you know. That's what meditation does, you know. It eliminates all the distractions. And then in the afternoon, he just had us ask him questions, which was interesting too, because he was giving us what we wanted, you know. So it was a good workshop. I mean, there is no blueprint for writing, you know, I don't think. Mm-hmm. The American artist Louis Nevelson said, one is born with the inspiration, it's just hard work. You know, writing and rewriting and editing and, yes, you know, et cetera, right? Maybe everything is right.
It's even difficult to write like a scholarly article. I can't just imagine to write an artistic piece. Do you find it exasperating? Do you find it unnerving? Like all the processes that writing has to go through in order to become what you wanted?
Yeah.
You find it a whole process?
You know, it's funny, you know, people say, well, just to give you an example, people say you have to take a risk if you're a writer or an artist. And I'm thinking, no, coal miners take risks, you know. People who climb Everest take risks. You know, a writer, if you get the perspective wrong in your painting, you're not going to hurt your eye. You know, you might hurt the painting, but not your eye. And you're given so many chances to change it and, you know, make it better over time, right? I started to write a novel 20 years ago, and I just couldn't do it. You know, I couldn't do it. But I'm still writing it in my head. Mm-hmm. It still comes up every now and then, and I make a little note, and I have a drawer that has that novel, and I put the note in. You know, so I never give up. It's never finished, you know. But it is fun. It is fun. Yeah.
Yes, it's good that you don't have that urge, that impulse that something has to be finished and perfected at one point. That you leave things like open and free and well, I don't know, not fully articulated, perhaps. Until the very end.
That's right. Maybe that's why you do the next piece, right? To try to finish what you couldn't express in the other one, or some people write the same book over and over, though, right? You know, as we know.
That's very true. Yes, like our field, they write the same article over and over. It's the same kind of thing. I guess that's
and they like
obsessions. You think that you're writing something different, but your obsession, your unconscious, just it comes over. Is there again? It's like
Charles Dickens writes about orphans over and over, right? And they're all different and they're all good, you know.
Okay, so let's see. Perhaps we can move on to the last part of this session, in which I may show some slides from your net, and then perhaps you would like to comment on them. Okay. The first one that I want to show is like the picture, the first slide in your work, where there is like a wrecked car, everything that is so rusty, and the navigator seat is open, and then you say enter. And this is like you're inviting your reader to go into that derelict old car.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
Yes, after snowslides. So, what's the promise and the reward of our entering your net, and also that?
Yeah, I remember. I think I tried different. They call this the splash page, the first page that you see, right, when you open. I think I tried many different ones. The great thing about walking in St. John's that I find is we have this big open areas that nothing has been done with. You know, they haven't been developed. There's nothing there, right? And they could be right in the middle of the city. Mm-hmm. And apparently the technical name is waste ground.
I see.
And this was one of those areas. And in those areas, I mean, this is one of the sort of the negative things about the city. People will leave their cars there, just abandon them, you know, and trees grow up in the car, you know, and they go rusty. And this was one of those cars. And some people like them. I mean, they're sort of picturesque in a negative kind of way, you know. Mm-hmm. But that was one of those cars that I discovered, and there seemed to be something desolate about it that I guess, you know, and also the colors, you know. I wanted to have simple colors. I tried to make the hypertext visually, you know, very easy to go through. So I used only brown, blue, and white for the most part, you know. And they're kind of the winter colors here. We get grass that turns kind of an ochre or brown color. like the like the sand in Sevilla.
Yes.
Beautiful color. So I like those three colors. Ochre, I guess it's a very almost a primitive color, in a way. And I guess that's what winter's like. It strips everything back, right, to its basic. Some people think that things are better under snow. Like a classic Chinese garden. It looks. I've been to them, and they look better when there's snow on top. And it's the same with St. John's. It looks better under snow. So everything kind of came together, I guess, with that old car.
Perhaps I'm going just to share with our audience, like one of the extracts that you will be reading from.
Oh, sure.
Close part of, and perhaps that will give us, will give you the chance of talking a little bit about St. John's after you read it out.
Okay.
So, I don't know whether you can see it right now, and if you may wish.
Oh, okay. Well, I put a copy on my iPad here. Oh, okay. Just to make it a bit easier. Would you like me to read it, or?
It might be nice, but
okay.
no.
Oh, you want me to talk about it? I think I'd have to read it first.
Yes, I think that you might read it first, so that when people watch it, they have like the time to know what it is about, and then you might comment on it later on.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. First of all, the opening part is from a scrap of paper. I had this scrap of paper, and I always find fragments very evocative and suggestive. Like part of a sentence I find can be more evocative than the whole sentence sometimes, or can suggest different things. So that's why I have these openings that are parts of a sentence. If you go to the front page of the hypertext, you will see that scrap of paper.
Yes.
Okay, so this sentence is "are being closed part of." And then I have a quote from Max Jacob. Max Jacob was Pablo Picasso's roommate when he first moved to Paris. And they were so poor that they shared the one bed. So Max would sleep during the day and Picasso would sleep during the night. I feel kind of, I love Picasso's work. I know that, his personality perhaps leaves a lot to be desired, but I just think he's such a fabulous artist. And so anyway, and Max was a prose poet, which is my favorite, which is what these are, prose poems. Prose poems are poems that just come to the edge of the page. Usually a poem has white space, but a prose poem fills up the whole space. It's quite a new form. I think it was developed in France, maybe about 150 years ago. So there's room to change it, and develop it. So anyway, the fragment is from Max Jacob's poem, and it says, "Her white arms became my whole horizon," which was evocative of the snow and this missing person. One of those in-between days when there's just TV and deep-fried brains with a moderate UV index. Magic hat, my beer coaster says. I am unknowable, my fridge magnet words say, and then the map falls off the wall. Big spill downtown, boredom all over the ground, seeping into the water, poisoning the town. I'm waiting for you to return so I can start living again. Since you've been gone, I've been buying the 2-liter size bottles of wine every 4 days, like milk. I eat mostly frozen things, unlabeled containers, thawing into unrecognizable stews. I still haven't gotten around to sweeping the floor. There's nothing on it anyway. Since you've been gone, I haven't been more than 2 blocks from this apartment. And there's nothing out there for me anyway. This morning, I finally put out the garbage. It felt like I was discarding exactly the same amount I brought home. This bothered me, so I went out and bought a large set of scales. It's fragmented for sure, eh?
Yes, that was very intense. And it certainly is a contrast between this and that you absorb all the everyday details of like home and perhaps going to shops and things. And then at the same time, the reader can go to the town by clicking on that highlighted word. And then you would be given them like a series of pictures that are quite, well, I don't know, picturesque. I don't like that word too much. And then,
sometimes humorous.
Yes.
Yeah. Because you don't want to be too black. If you're talking about a breakup, it's kind of boring, except for the person going through it. And it's kind of, it's all common and it's very negative. So, you need some humor, I think.
Yes.
There's a saying in North America anyway, that if life gives you lemons, make lemon juice. Well, this guy makes whiskey sours, right?
Yes, that's very true. And at the same time, like we have like the viewer or the reader has like the two sides of on the one hand, we have the soul and the mood and the sadness and at the very same time, there is this more entertaining part where you get to know the city as you're getting to know the soul of this man who's in pain. Yes.
Oh, that's nice for you to say that. Yeah.
Yes. Because
this whole hypertext almost disappeared because I had to pay the company to have it on the internet, right? And no one seemed interested in it. So I was about to just forget about it, put it away, when the library were interested. So they posted it on their website, and then you connected. So those, random things happened at just the right time, really.
That was a lucky fact.
Yeah.
Well, we would have lost a lot by not having this kind of thing. That's super interesting. And it never extinguishes. It's like every time that you go back to this, you will find something new. And even in this,
nice for you to say.
Yes, it's true. You know how hooked I am to it. And even in the part here that you're talking about these things that are a little bit depressing, there's lots of humor in the writing as well, in the written part of.
We laugh so that we don't cry, right? As the saying goes.
It's true.
Like at funerals, people laugh a lot when they're at funerals for some reason, when they have a visit, right? There's a lot of sort of camaraderie.
Yes, it's true. And we also raise our voices and do things that and then we may wonder what we are doing, but we can help with that. It's very
good. And at weddings we fight, right? Sometimes.
I've never seen that, but if you say so.
Oh, good. I'm glad you didn't.
Okay, I don't know whether you are in the mood of going to another of the pages.
Oh, for sure.
We see Hydro spokesman said serve. And perhaps we can do the same as before. You can read it out. As you're reading it out, I may just click on a clapboard house, and our viewers will have the chance of having a look at all the pictures of houses that you've made. Also the captions that are really fun.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Shall we do that now then? And perhaps that will be almost the end.
Okay, I don't have that one here.
You don't have that one?
No, and it would take me a second. Maybe if you want to take a pause and they can cut this out, I could find it on my tablet. But
perhaps what we can do while you look for it is I can read it out because it's
here. Sure, yeah, if you want to, yeah.
And I'm sure that my reading won't be as.
Oh, you can read it if you want. You read it.
As good as yours. And then when you're ready, I just stop and then you will take over. If that's okay with you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so here we read a BC Hydro spokesman said, "Sir, I dream spontaneous revolt against tourism swells up. People refuse to make anything with a seal pup, a Newfoundland dog, or a clapboard house in it. And all the waves go away and won't return. It's a real crisis. Jankos on my balcony, their tiny footprints like equal signs in the new snow. By noon, the rain has come and taken it all away. It's as though the paint has been stripped from the world so that its worn surface shows through. The fog whites and signal hill heaves into view like a big lumpy old fur coat. thrown over the back of a chair. The harbor looks like a lake from here. Children stay indoors and pretend they are adults. The snow people they build collapse into postures of resignation, melt into the streets which run like rivers, and the storm soars back up. After supper, some kind of fake Viking vessel they haven't really rowed from Grindon Inn, commemorating a historic event only the Department of Tourism cares about, sails in through the Narrows under fog so thick no one can see it anyway, the fireworks echoing in the hills and the smoke from them driving back to our homes where the shouts of tardy revelers go on through the night.
Okay.
But sorry about my, you should have done it since you've written it. Have you found the page? And there.
Oh, no, I haven't. I was listening to you.
Sorry, I probably mispronounced something because I wasn't ready for this.
Oh,
and then I'm just going to say, because I'm sharing this, like the slides where you see these clubhouses in St. John's.
Oh, right. Yeah. This house, when I was a kid, see the little part on the right?
Yes.
People would open up little tiny grocery stores in their house. So every street pretty much had a little tiny grocery store, you know?
Oh, that's nice.
It disappeared, right? They've disappeared. But they're like the ghosts of little grocery stores. Yes. They've been reconverted into bedrooms or something.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, and then these other.
There was a big open area, like I was telling you about. One day I went up and this building was there. You know, I hadn't been there for maybe 5 days. It was like it had just dropped out of the sky. It's some sort of senior center. Because when I go by, sometimes everyone is playing bingo. You know. I don't know if you have bingo. Do you play bingo in Spain?
Yes, they do. Yes, especially old people.
Yeah. Now this house has since disappeared. It's kind of houses here are very plain in this city. Mm-hmm. Someone who a friend of mine came for the first time once, and he said it's almost like people just threw them up and they didn't really care that they weren't that particular about them. You know, sometimes they're not symmetrical. The window will be a little bit off balance. And also next to it is a Newfoundland pine. They're kind of these contrary pine trees. They're not symmetrical at all, right? You see how, and they're all different, every single one of them. And they're disappearing, right? The pine trees. Yeah.
And then finally, here there
this is
the apartment building.
Yeah, this is just the end of an apartment building. You know, it has almost no character. I really like it. It's very plain. I like the backs, the behind the buildings. Often they're completely the opposite, especially schools. Schools are completely, they have a public face and a, okay.
Okay, so I've stopped sharing these pages from your net, and
the piece that you read was kind of I was just kind of making fun of the local tourist scene, you know, and the celebrations. Like Newfoundlanders love to celebrate, as I'm sure they do, you know, in your country, right? Any excuse at all. They don't even know what it's about, you know. It's time for a party, right?
Perhaps at this point that we are like reaching the end of our session, you would like to talk a little bit about St. John's or about Newfoundland or about Newfoundlanders. That is, if you're comfortable enough to talk about.
Oh, sure, yeah. Newfoundland is a funny little place, you know, in a way. I'm glad I'm from here, and I'm glad that I lived in big cities. And I can see the contrast, and I can appreciate both, I think, because of that. But the thing about Newfoundlanders, the people who don't live in Newfoundland, who grew up here, love it probably more than the people who live here, you know, because they have this nostalgic idea of it.
Yes, yes. And probably I'm one of those.
Sorry?
Probably I am one of those.
But there's a saying that you can tell a Newfoundlander in heaven because he's the one who wants to come home. It's like heaven is not good enough.
Yeah. When I said I'm one of those, it's not because I'm a Newfoundlander, but because I'm one of those people that are attracted by or was attracted by the place, and I wanted to find more about it, and I've gone there many times and lived there as long as I could.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe there is a bunch of people as well that find the place very, very interesting, not just because it's picturesque, but because of the abundance of art and talent and of art and that is there.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think there's a tradition of that. Like we're an island, you know, and we've been thrown together in small communities. And so we have to provide our own entertainment. You know, we have to entertain ourselves, or we have traditionally, because there wasn't TV or satellites. Because when I was a child, we had a TV set with 2 channels, right? That was it, and a radio. So if there were people that came over, my mother would sometimes disappear and come out dressed up differently and put on a little show almost, you know. And my father made art, you know. He had, you know, he had no audience for it. He gave it to us, you know, to us. So there is that tradition of providing your own.
Yes, it's true. Yes,
Yeah.
the numbers and everything, I guess, come from that as well. And also from the close relationship that people at least used to have in the past. Whereas you were the entertainment of your neighbors, not of your family, as you said, but also of your neighbors and the people living close to you.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, when I grew up, we didn't lock our doors. And sometimes I would be sitting alone watching TV and a neighbor would come through, you know. I go,
And open the fridge.
looking for my mother, right? And one night we lived on a hill. I just want to tell you this last story. We lived on a hill, and it was in the winter, and a man got stuck in his car. So he came in and slept on our Chesterfield. We didn't know him. We had never seen him, but he slept on our Chesterfield, our sofa. But that has changed now, you know, the city has changed. But yeah.
Still,
I keep wanting to ask you questions.
Yes, as well you can, of course. So I don't know. I mean, I think we have covered like a range of things that we wanted to talk about that may make your work perhaps more accessible to students that are perhaps reluctant to, I don't know, like open and enter a book that is not
that's right. Yeah.
And by getting to know the author firsthand, that's a great incentive.
Oh, good. Yeah.
For them, and you see, so that they feel, you know, like this hunger for your work.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah.
Really, I don't know what else. If you would like to say something else as a way of conclusion, or you wanted to ask me a question, or because I'm not going to pester you with more questions. You know, this has been enough, and I thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. I would just like to say one thing. I think what I would leave a new you know, person who's coming to it for the first time and has never read a hypertext, I would like to leave them with the idea that it is strange, you know, but it won't hurt you, you know, it won't bite. And also, you know, when you read when you pick up a print book, I think there's this anticipation. You feel like you should read the whole book, you know, and people feel bad about abandoning it after a few pages. But with a hypertext, it's different. Just read as much as you want. Think of it as a new city and walk around a little bit. Maybe your boat is leaving, you know, and you only have an hour to go and see what the city is like. So, you know, do with it what you wish.
That's a very good tip, actually. Yes, I think that because like each page is somehow autonomous, although it depends on the larger narrative of someone who's going through certain things. But every page in itself is a work of art, and you can stay there forever if you want.
Yeah.
Like all the sentences, look at the pictures again, and then it's satisfying just by looking and reading at one page. is it a satisfying experience in itself? You don't have to go through all the paths and all the labyrinth to
exactly, yeah. Because it happens in one moment, in a sense. It's someone walking around thinking of the future, maybe in the past, you know, at once, right? So it happens in the present. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So,
thank you.
It's been really a pleasure to have you here and to be able to speak with you again. And I think this will be the end of our session. Okay.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Take care. Talk to you soon, I hope.
Yes, I also hope so.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Yes, bye-bye, Don. Bye.